As with my last couple of episodes, I've got some exciting news to share with all of you. Mark your calendars for CrimeCon Manchester 2025, partnered by True Crime, which is set to take place on the 27th of September 2025. So CrimeCon UK is coming to Manchester for the very first time this year, and I will be there, along with some of the biggest names in true crime at what will be the ultimate true crime event. Now, whether you've been watching my content from the very beginning or you've just started binging my episodes, this is your chance to meet up with me in person, share your theories, and even uncover new details behind some of the stories that I cover. I'm beyond excited to meet you all, though I have no expectations that the reverse is true. But join me and the true crime community at CrimeCon Manchester, partnered by True Crime, the expert-led true crime channel available across all platforms. Let's make this the most unforgettable CrimeCon yet. You won't want to miss it. I truly hope to see you there. Now on with the episode. We often say that all is not as it seems within true crime, but the instances where it hits different are those where the difference between the appearance and the truth behind it are poles apart. For this episode, we visit South Korea to look at a man who, on paper, was the very image of the perfect man who just seemed to do everything just right. But when the facade began to crumble, what was underneath was beyond shocking. We're going to 2022 and to the areas in and around Seoul, South Korea, to look at the case of Lee Ki-young. This is Murder of Crows. Seoul is the capital and largest city of South Korea. The broader Seoul metropolitan area encompassing Seoul, Gyeonggi Province and Incheon emerged as the world's sixth largest metropolitan economy in 2022, trailing behind only New York, Tokyo, Los Angeles, Paris and London. And the area hosts more than half of South Korea's population. Although Seoul's population peaked at over 10 million, it has gradually decreased since 2014 and currently stands at around 9.6 million residents. Seoul is the seat of the South Korean government. Seoul's history traces back to around 18 BC, when it was founded by the people of Bakji, one of the three kingdoms of Korea. During the Joseon dynasty, Seoul was officially designated as the capital, surrounded by the fortress wall of Seoul. In the early 20th century, Seoul was occupied by the Empire of Japan, temporarily renamed Kaijo, or Gyeongseong in Korean. The Korean War brought fierce battles with soul-changing hands 4 times, and leaving the city mostly in ruins. Nevertheless, the city has undergone significant reconstruction and rapid urbanization. Seoul was rated as Asia's most livable city, with the 2nd highest quality of life globally, according to Arcadis in 2015, and a GDP per capita of approximately $40,000. And it's to this locale that we go today to first look at a woman named Moon So-hoo, which is not her real name, but the reasons for anonymity will become painfully obvious later. But nonetheless, she was excited about the prospects of life with her amazing new boyfriend. Moon So-hoo had been seeing her boyfriend for several months and across numerous dates during that time. He was the perfect gentleman and was very good looking. He was just the man that she could see herself settling down with. But there was a critical acid test that this young man needed to pass first. He needed to meet her parents. They were due to meet on the 20th of December 2022 at a posh barbecue restaurant, and she was sat with her beau, 32-year-old Lee Ki-young, waiting for them to arrive. But she really had nothing to worry about. The man who had swept her off her feet was about to sweep her parents off their feet too. He stood like a true gent when her parents first arrived. He regaled her father with stories from his years of military service, and told her mother stories of his many pets, showing plenty of photos along the way. By the end of the night, they were more than approving of their daughter's choice of suitor. Moon had no way of knowing that the ending of the night that was to come would be the first cracks in their ideal world that would end up crashing down in the most grotesque way. As her parents left, excited about their daughter's prospects, Moon noticed that Lee was a little unsteady on his feet. Moon knew he'd drunk some alcohol over the course of the night, and intending to err on the side of caution to keep their night in the right mood, she casually mentioned maybe leaving the car that they had arrived in the car park and just getting a taxi instead. She did not get the response she expected. Lee exploded with an anger Moon had not seen before, accusing her of nagging, of belittling him, of ruining the evening. The fight escalated quickly, echoing through the concrete parking garage. And just like that, he ended the relationship. He turned his back and stormed off to hail a cab. Well, Moon stood frozen in shock and blindsided by this sudden shift in his manner. She eventually hailed her own taxi and rode home, with tears streaming down her face and heartbreak crushing her chest. But that heartbreak wouldn't last long. The very next morning, Moon awoke to a knock at her front door. A delivery man handed her an enormous bouquet of fresh roses, and attached was a card from Lee, reading, Please accept these roses as a part of my apology. Last night didn't go so well. I'm truly sorry. Please come to dinner with me tonight." Relieved and genuinely touched, Moon called him immediately and forgave him. She told him her parents had no idea about the fight that they'd had, and they could just put it all behind them. That night they reunited over a luxurious meal, and Lee had also booked them into a 5-star hotel for the evening. What followed was a whirlwind of indulgence. Shopping sprees, fine restaurants, romantic nights in opulent hotels. Lee insisted on spoiling her. It was Christmas, he said. She deserved it. Moon was flattered and reassured and began to let her guard down again. That nightmare in the parking garage seemed like a dim and distant memory. And with their relationship comfortably rebuilt, on Christmas morning, Lee asked Moon to do him a favour. Could she stop by his apartment to feed his pets while he ran errands preparing for their Christmas dinner? And Moon gladly agreed. She wanted this to be a partnership after all, and she arrived at around 11 a.m. with her key in her hand. As she stepped off the elevator and walked down the hallway, she was hit with an overpowering scent. But this was a good one. It was the scent of roses, and she smiled. Had Lee planned another surprise? Excited, she called his name outside the door, and there was no answer. She knocked, and there was still no answer, so finally she used the key and stepped inside. Now the apartment was in darkness and was eerily quiet, but there were roses everywhere, in vases, on tables, on windowsills. But these weren't fresh roses. They were wilted. Many of them were days old and sat in brown and fetid water. His 3 cats began winding around her legs, desperate to be fed. She walked to the kitchen but couldn't find the pet food anywhere. Hoping to find it in a closet, she walked down the hallway to a narrow storage door. She turned the knob, but it was stuck, as if there was something blocking it. Tension prickled her skin. Now she was still only thinking of feeding the animals and leaving, and in desperation she just yanked the door open. And then she screamed. Inside the closet was the body of a man, twisted, lifeless, and decaying. What she could not have known at that point was that it was the corpse of a taxi driver, and it had been there for 5 days. So let's rewind back to Lee and Moon's argument the night that he met her parents. That night, after storming out of the parking garage, Lee didn't call a cab. He waited until Moon was gone, and then returned to his car and drove off, drunk as a skunk. On the way home, he crashed into a taxi. No one was injured, the cars were still drivable, but Lee panicked. He had a long history with DUI arrests. Once in military prison in 2013, again in 2018, and then in 2019. A 4th would mean serious prison time. So he offered the driver cash in exchange for silence. No police, no paperwork, no problem. The driver agreed on one condition. He wanted to be paid immediately. Lee brought him back to his apartment, but it was here that they argued over the amount of money to be paid, and at this point Lee snapped. He beat the taxi driver to death. Then he stuffed the body into the narrow closet, the same one that Moon would open days later. Over the next few days, Lee used the man's credit cards to pay for dinners, hotels, and gifts. He used the man's phone to send texts to his family pretending that he was still alive. To hide the stench of the rotting body, he filled the apartment with roses. Moon naturally reported what she had found, and the investigation that followed uncovered even more horrifying truths. The apartment wasn't Lee's. It belonged to his ex-girlfriend, a bartender in her 50s. The cats and dog weren't his either, they were hers. When police searched the home, they found blood evidence proving that Lee had also murdered her and taken over her life. For weeks he had been using her phone to send messages to her family, pretending she was simply busy and also travelling. Among his possessions, police also discovered the phone of a third missing woman. Lee denied any involvement in the disappearance of this third woman, and that case remains open and unsolved. But perhaps the most unsettling part of the story came after his arrest. As CCTV footage of Lee began airing across South Korean media, clips of him smiling and talking to the taxi driver before the murder, a strange thing happened. The public became obsessed with his looks. Thousands online commented not on his crimes, but on how attractive he was. Some even compared him to actors. He became a viral sensation, not for being a killer, but for being too handsome to be evil. There were very real fears that people, especially women, might try to reach out to him, romanticize him, or even blame Moon for his incarceration. Authorities took extreme measures to protect her identity, and Moon Soo-ho remains a pseudonym to this day. Lee Ki-young eventually confessed to two murders, that of the taxi driver and that of his ex-girlfriend. As well as the taxi driver, he was, as I said, also charged with murdering his former girlfriend in the previous August and abandoning her body on the banks of a stream in Paju, just northwest of Seoul. But her body has to this day not yet been found. The murder was allegedly aimed at stealing the mobile phone and credit cards of the former girlfriend who owned the apartment that they were living in together at the time of the murder. A total of 9 charges were brought against Lee: robbery, homicide, concealment of bodies, computer-related fraud, infringement of communication networks, forgery of administrative documents, violation of the Specialized Credit Finance Business Act, and special laws. The Ujeongbu District Court branch in Goyang, just northwest of Seoul, heard the case where he faced the very real prospect of a death sentence. But they issued a sentence of life in prison. And along with issuing this sentence, they also ordered that he wear an electronic monitoring device for 30 years. Now, those given life sentences are eligible for parole when they have served in jail for more than 20 years and have shown good behaviour. The court said in its ruling that Lee had meticulously planned the murder and subsequent crimes and continued with the planned murder without any hesitation and gained economic benefits by acquiring the victim's money. It added that his crimes were committed without remorse. Lee deserved a life sentence because the wounds of the bereaved families hadn't been healed yet as they continued to live in pain. And the court called Lee brutal for having committed the heinous crimes, with the court adding, only if the law were possible, a life sentence without parole would have been ordered that would allow him to be isolated from society permanently, further referring to Lee's crimes as extravagantly cruel and serious.
전 연인과 택시기사를 살해하고 유기한 혐의로 구속된 이기영. 그의 실물에 관심이 쏠린 상황인데요. 경찰은 지난 12월 29일 신상공개위원회를 열어서 그의 얼굴을 공개하기로 결정했습니다. 이때 공개된 사진인데요. 과거 운전면허증 사진이라고 합니다. 그런데 보정 작업을 거쳤으리라 네티즌들은 짐작을 하고요. 정기적으로 이기영 집을 방문한 점검원의 말에 따르면 공개 사진이 실제 인상과는 너무 달랐다라는 의견을 남겼습니다. 택시기사를 살해한 후 닷새 뒤에 찍힌 CCTV 영상입니다. 여러분도 한번 판단해 보시죠. 머리 스타일, 얼굴형 어떻게 느껴지시나요?
신상 공개를 하도록 법으로 정해놓긴 했지만 신상 공개가 무죄로 추정되고 있는 사람인데 본인이 원하지 않는데도 불구하고 강제로 사진을 찍을 수 있는 권리는 또 아니거든요. 범죄 현장 검증을 하러 간다거나 아니면 경찰에서 검찰로 송치하는 과정에서 그냥 자연스럽게 언론에 노출되는 방법으로만 공개를 해왔던 겁니다.
이기영이 최근 사진 일명 머그샷 공개를 원치 않는다고 해서 공개할 수 없었다고 합니다. 네티즌들은 분통을 터뜨리는 상황이고요. 이기영의 실물에 대한 관심이 더욱 커져가는 가운데 1월 4일이었습니다. 이기영이 공식적인 언론에 처음 노출되는 현장을 찾아가 봤습니다. 잠시 뒤 드디어 모습을 드러내는 이기영입니다. 하지만 모자와 마스크로 얼굴을 모두 가린 모습이죠.
얼굴 왜 가리셨습니까? 마스크 한번 벗어주시죠.
전혀 미동도 없습니다.
피해자 유족에게 할 말 없으세요? 금손 노린 거 아니십니까? 피해자 유족에게 한 말씀만 다시 해주시죠.
유족분들과 피해자분들께 죄송합니다.
이기영이 머그샷 공개를 거부한 이유는 무엇일까? 가족들 때문이라고 합니다. 수사 과정에서도 가족에게 범행 사실을 알리지 말라며 신상 공개에 예민한 반응을 보인 것으로 알려졌습니다. 경찰도 여기에 대해서는 뾰족한 수가 없다고 말하는데요.
마음대로 사진을 찍을 테니까 어디 서서 사진을 찍어라, 고개를 들어라, 마스크를 벗어라 이렇게 요구할 수 있는 그런 법적인 근거는 없어요. 안 만들어져 있는 겁니다. 그러니까 이번에 이기영 같은 경우에는 내 얼굴을 강제로 공개할 수 없다는 것까지도 알고 있으니까 나는 안 벗겠노라라고 하니까 딱히 강제적으로 취할 방법이 없었던 거죠.
피의자 신상 공개 때마다 논란이 되는 우리나라의 신상 공개 제도. 그런데 해외는 머그샷이 그대로 공개가 된다고 합니다. 대안은 없을까요?
근본적으로 그럼 이 문제를 어떻게 할 것인가를 제대로 다시 한번 연구를 해야죠. 지금처럼 아직도 그냥 경찰서에서 심의위원회 열어가지고 등 떠밀려서 공개하거나 아니면 하지 않거나 이런 식으로 정하는 것보다는 예를 들어서 법원에서 구속영장을 청구하는 단계에서 공개 청구를 해서 법원의 영장심사와 같이 심사를 받는다든가 이런 어떤 제도화를 좀 제대로 시켜야 하지 않을까 싶어요.
While little has been reported about the victims of this dashing but devious and deplorable man, it is without doubt that they did not deserve to die. And as such, this video is dedicated to these innocent souls. The possible third victim remains to be seen. But 2 murders is obviously too many. And the prospect of this man going free in 20 years is terrifying, since he will only be in his 50s and still pose a threat to society at large. I can only hope that rehabilitation works better in Korean prison than it seems to in British and American establishments. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. Don't forget that CrimeCon UK will be coming to Manchester in September, and there is still time to get involved with one of the UK's finest true crime events. And if you use my code CROWS, you can get 10% off tickets. But with all of that said, I'm Steve, this fluffy fusspot is Samson, and we will see you when we see you.